Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. This week on the show, I'm joined by Lake Pickle to discuss southern deer hunting, summer deer prep, and the fascinating stories of wildlife conservation that inspired his new podcast with MeatEater, Backwoods University. All right, welcome back to the Wired to Hunt podcast brought to you by First Light. This week on the show, as I just mentioned, we are joined by my buddy Lake Pickle. He not only has one of the best names that I've heard, but he is also a tremendous storyteller, podcaster, hunter, representative of the southern hunting and fishing community, employee of Onyx, and the host of the latest podcast with the MeatEater network, Backwoods University. And so today on the show, we do a couple things. We discuss his new podcast. We discuss, how he became fascinated with wildlife conservation, and the stories of the people who are studying animals and studying ways that we can keep them around and preserving our hunting opportunities and traditions. We discuss that. We talk a little bit about his background as a southern deer hunter, his experience. I didn't mention this at the top, but I should have. He has filmed and worked with the Primos hunting crew for many years as well. So he has this really interesting background and following around diehard deer hunters like Will Primos or Brad Ferris. And in this podcast, we discuss a little bit of what makes southern deer hunting culture unique, what makes the way you need to hunt in the South unique, whether that be, hunting around people that are baiting or hunting in big woods country. So we talk tactics. We talk about summer deer prep, doing camera work, velvet scouting, all that kind of stuff, and much, much more. So today, you've got a varied show. We're talking deer, we're talking wildlife, we're talking conservation, and we're doing it with a very fun, very informative, great guest, Mr. Pickle. And I just want to say very quickly before we get to that, if you are listening to this in real time when this podcast just dropped, which is, I'm recording this on June 30th. This podcast will drop, I believe it'll be July 3rd. If you are listening then, you are hopefully very well aware of the public land sale that was proposed within the Senate reconciliation bill. We've been talking about it a ton on social media. You hopefully listened to the podcast with me and Cal that we dropped last week as a bonus. But as you probably saw, that sale was removed from the bill. So the mandatory sale of over 1 million acres of public lands was taken out of the bill. That is great news. Each and every one of you who made a phone call or sent an email or, informed your friends and family or posted about it or sent letters, whatever it was, if you were involved in this campaign to stop the sale of public lands, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your actions, for your words, for the time you spent and invested in standing up for our public places and wildlife and our opportunities to hunt and fish and get out there. It's so important, and I'm encouraged by the impact we had. The rallying of the hunting and fishing and larger outdoor community in opposition to this was phenomenal. This was an unbelievable kind of coalescence of different kinds of people all saying, hey, Mr. Politician, we are not going to stand for this. We care about our public lands. This is as American as it gets. And our lives in many ways revolve around these places. Get out of here. Keep your hands off our public lands. And our voices were heard. So our voices matter. Our advocacy matters, and we can make a difference. So I want to remind people of two things. Number one, don't ever forget this in the future. Your voice does matter. We can make a difference. It is worth engaging on these things. It's worth paying attention to these things. And number two, that's very important to remember because this isn't the end. This is not the last proposed sale that we're going to see someday down the road. If you read my book, That Wild Country, or if you've listened to past podcasts I've done about this, we were talking about this back in 2014, back in 2015, 2016, 2017. We talked about it earlier this year for decades and decades. In my research for my book, what stood out was that for as long as we have had public lands, people have been trying to dispose of them, transfer them, sell them, cut them down, drill them up, dig them up, whatever it is, to extract dollars from them. They have been trying for not 10 years, not 20, not 50, not 80, 100 plus years. They have been trying this. So don't for a second think that they are not going to continue trying this in the future. There are a whole bunch of things being proposed in this bill that maybe by the time you're listening to this has already passed. There are other things in that bill that are downright destructive to many of our public lands. And outside of just that bill, things that were originally included in the bill but had to get pulled out for varying reasons, that stuff's still being pushed by politicians today. Things like putting in the mine on the edge of the boundary waters, putting in a road through one of the last unroaded places in the wild of Alaska. Things like drilling in the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, where Cal and I just visited, this unbelievable, still intact, still truly wild ecosystem. They want to turn that into an industrial center too. There's so many examples. I can't even list them all right now. We're going to have to keep engaging. We're going to have to keep staying up to date on this stuff. This was not like a blip on the radar. This is just kind of the way it's going to be. If you care about hunting, if you care about fishing, if you care about your public lands, we're needed. You're needed. This is how we make sure that these things are still around for our kids and their kids and selfishly for us. Hopefully in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, however long I'm around, I sure hope that I can return to these wild places that I've experienced and still see them in a wild and intact state. Still be able to hunt there. Still be able to fish there. And that's on us. Because if we don't stand up for these places, certainly nobody else will. It's the folks that are out there seeing them, feeling them, experiencing them, hunting on them, fishing on them, camping on them. We're the only ones who really get it. So how can we expect anyone else to stand up if we are not willing to? So that is it for me. I appreciate everything each and every one of you did. Let's keep the momentum. Let's keep on cranking on this stuff. Let's keep our public lands and wildlife and wild places around for the future. And with that little monologue out of the way, appreciate you being here. Let's get to my chat with Lake Pickle. All right, joining me now on the line is Mr. Lake Pickle. Welcome to the show, Lake.
Man, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, hey, it's my pleasure. I am very excited, not only to be chatting with you, but to be chatting with you as a official MeatEater contributor. I don't know if I'd call you like a colleague, but at least a contributor, right? I mean, you're pretty officially in the MeatEater family now, so welcome.
It's one of those things, like, I never thought contributor, whatever title you want to bestow on it. It's not one that I pictured myself having, but I'm happy to have it. So yeah, I'm excited about everything tied to that. It's been a fun time.
I bet. Well, it's been fun to watch your stuff from afar. Seeing your involvement with Primos, and then your guys' podcast, and then stuff you've done with Onyx, and then when I've heard that you were bumping around with Clay and Brent more often, that was great to see. And then, as I just told you off air, I actually sometime this winter was talking to my boss. I'm like, hey, I really want to do a podcast that's more about just wildlife issues and people and stuff like that. And he's like, man, that's a great idea. But Lake Pickle, right? He's already doing that podcast for us now. And I'm like, oh man, that's a smart guy. He beat me to the punch. So yeah, I'm stoked for it. Very excited for what you got in store for us with Backwoods University. How are you feeling about stuff so far? The first couple episodes are out. Does it feel real yet? Are you excited that it's out there? I know it can be like a tense moment when your baby, metaphorically, goes out into the world for the first time.
Dude, I was obviously, to answer one of those questions, like, I can answer one of them very simply. You asked if I was like excited that it was out there. I'm stoked that it's out there, because it was like this process of like kind of concepting and figuring out, because honestly, like, I can't fully take credit. Like, I didn't come out the gate and go, I'm going to do a podcast about wildlife and how we as humans interact with them and influence them. It came out the gate as just like a wildlife biology focused podcast. And the human side of it didn't really come into play until I kind of got into the weeds of really starting to build some episodes. And I went to Clay. I was like, Clay, there's not a single wildlife species or wildlife process or anything that I can talk to or talk about where you have to mention us, like we as humans, like we're a huge influence in all of it. And it could go either way. Like a lot, that's the interesting part. Cause a lot of times when you hear human influence on wildlife, it's associated with the negative. And that does happen, obviously. But there's some episodes that'll come out where we have had a overwhelmingly positive effect. But it's been really fascinating. But yeah, the day that episode 1 came out, I don't think I'd ever been more, I don't, nervous isn't the word, just like, I don't know, it's just tense, like there's just a lot of, I'd never put so much work into a single podcast. And it was just kind of, I guess, like, man, I hope people like it. That's just what I was hoping. I hope people liked it. And I hope that it translated, that it was, people were understanding what I was trying to get across.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I had a really busy day that day. I wasn't able to just like, sit there and twiddle my thumbs.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I
Doom
might have.
scroll on Instagram for comments.
Yeah, gnawing on drywall. But I'm psyched that it's out. Yeah.
So for folks who haven't heard yet, can you give us like the 1-minute cliff notes on what the theme and direction of this show is?
Sure. So what we say is Backwoods University focuses on wildlife, wild places, and people who dedicate their lives to conserving both. And that's really what we do. Like the first episode that came out was like kind of an overarching view on bison. And when you first hear that, you're like, oh, bison, like kind of cliche, honestly. But it's like, but bison in the eastern United States. Bison in the eastern United States don't get talked about a lot, man. And what was funny is I was kind of like I had a large amount of time to do these first couple episodes just because we were trying to figure everything out. And so I was kicking around ideas and I was kicking around this bison idea. And I was like, is this as like a unknown of a topic as I think it is? And I would be talking to friends of mine from around here that are outdoorsmen and that hunt, that fish, that care a lot about conservation history. And I would point blank, some of them I'd go, hey, did you know that we had bison here in Mississippi? And they'd be like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, we did. And the more I bumped around and asked folks that and talked about it, I was like, yeah, this absolutely needs to be talked about. But human influence is pretty hefty on that one, as you can imagine. And the most recent one, the one that came out yesterday, Bob White Quail, that was spurred off of a personal interest of mine. I got into upland bird hunting probably 6 or 7 years ago now. And my mom dug up this picture of my grandfather quail hunting on the piece of family ground that I grew up deer hunting on that is almost void of quail now. And it kicks you down this line of thought. You're like, well, wait a minute. Like all these stories of these guys and English pointers and limits a quail every day. And that's just what they did. And now they're like this foregone almost afterthought of an animal. And you're like, well, what happened? Ask the question. And so that's kind of what we've been doing is like you take a look at an animal or a person. There's one coming up in a couple weeks about the first wildlife biologist in Mississippi, who was a woman named Fannie Cook, who's been pretty incredible. But just trying to get a deeper understanding on wildlife, what they need, and then how we influence them and how we can influence them going forward.
So you grew up, as I understand it, like a lot of us, hunting, fishing, playing in the outdoors, doing all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When and how did you transition to being interested in this next kind of level of understanding? Or asked another way, why is this set of topics and issues that this podcast is framed around? Why is that of interest to you? How did this come about for you?
Man, that's a good question. It kind of like, again, I didn't orchestrate it, because when I was a kid growing up hunting, I was much like any other kid that was into hunting. If my dad would have let me shoot over the limit of something, I probably would have done it because I just didn't know any better. You know what I mean? Like you just don't think that way, or I didn't at least. You just are told, hey, you stop at 15 doves or whatever it is, and that's just what you know. But as you get older, I'll tell you what, a lot of what had to do with it was I was a wildlife science student at Mississippi State University, and I got in some classes there. Like I remember one of the classes was basically, I can't remember the name of the class, but it was basically teaching like like how wildlife conservation and agriculture systems could coincide with one another. And that was the first time I'd heard of like some like CRP type programs and conservation programs. And like it kind of like pushed my thinking further. And that was the first, like I remember that professor telling us like, well, the reason that they came up with CP33 is because all the fence rows were gone, and that was having a terrible effect on upland birds. And that's the first time I heard about some sort of link to why we didn't have quail anymore. And I'm like, whoa, I mean, it just kicked me down this whole line of thought. And then obviously when I went to Primos, man, I mean, there's a lot of things I got a lot to be thankful for, man. But if anything poured gasoline on that fire, it's the amount of time I got to spend around Will Primos. Because like one of the first times I met Will was at a farm that he used to have in the Mississippi Delta called Rivers Run. And one of the first things he did was I got in the truck with him and he rode me around his farm. And he was like, that's where we got warm season native grasses planted. And that's where we got this planted and this. And we got this for a corridor for the deer. And I mean, like, my wheels are just spinning. I was like 21, But that, and him explaining like, hey, where we've got these native grasses planted, this was in row crop, but we put it back in native grasses and now quail can live there. And you're like, what? I mean, and so those just influences like that over time just really started to pique my interest. And then I guess it just kind of compounded over time.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that too. That sounds pretty similar to my story. It's you start out with this just, hey, I love this activity. I love these places, these critters doing this stuff. It's fun. And then at some point, there's all of a sudden this like aha moment where you realize like, oh, there's a reason why we have this thing or don't have this thing. Well, there's a reason why we have this place or don't have these places like we used to. There's versions of either type, right? There's stories on both sides of that coin. And then for a lot of folks, it then sends you down a whole bunch of winding rabbit holes as you start chasing those questions, right? So how many episodes do you have in the can so far? Can you tell me that?
4. Well, okay. 5.
All right. So you got 5. And so you've got Bob White, you've got Buffalo, you've got a wildlife biologist. So you've got a breadth of topics. I'm curious, if you were to zoom out so far, given the topics you've explored, is there any overarching similarities or themes that you've already kind of pulled out from this experience so far that are standing out in your mind?
Yeah, it is. The probably the most abstract one, but also like the most like powerful one, I think, is you cannot love what you don't understand. And that's, like I said, that sounds big and broad, but it's true. The one about the wildlife biologist, man, and you're a whitetail guy, so you'll appreciate this. Mississippi has and other states might be like this as well. I've just looked at this one introspectively because I live here. I'm from here, but we have a very, very complex and complicated history with our wildlife and our natural resources. So right now, we have our white-tailed deer population is a little bit over 1.5 million in the state, and it's not. I mean, and to the point, like our Mississippi Department of Wildlife is literally imploring licensed hunters to shoot more deer, not go over their limits, but like I think it's like 5 does and $3 or something a year, which is very like a pretty good bag limit. But they're like, the average hunter is shooting between like 1 and 2 a year. And they're like, please shoot more. Like we've got too many.
Sounds like our deal in Michigan too.
Yeah. So in 1929, Aldo Leopold made a trip down to Mississippi to do kind of a survey of the natural resources. Because at the time we didn't have a game and fish department. We had no infrastructure. And it was estimated in 1929, that's almost 100 years ago, not quite, 1,200 deer was the estimate.
Isn't that crazy?
Insane. And it was not, and that's what I mean when I say you can't love what you don't understand. It was not like no one set out going, you know what, we're going to wipe these out, or like there was no malintent really.
Yeah.
There was the Great Depression. People were trying to feed their family. There was market hunting. There was sport hunting back then, just an overexertion of it. And one of the coolest things in that Leopold report, and then the follow up with what Miss Fanny Cook did, the first biologist, is they notated clearly. They were like, if wildlife is going to succeed in this state, we have to form a partnership with the sportsmen. And so like the first people that they paired up with were private landowners that were like in serious concern because they were like, we don't want to lose this. And that at the time, it's easy to look, now we have so much information at our fingertips and like deer management and habitat. We have all this stuff. Back then, no one knew. No one knew. But there was a yearning for it. There was a yearning for understanding. And that's what saved the wildlife of my home state.
And it's such a common story for so many states too. For so many years, we thought that these critters were limitless. We thought there was no way that we could possibly send them to an oblivion. And then came as a shock when all of a sudden they started truly disappearing. But
yeah,
man, we figured it out at the last moment, and thank goodness, right?
Yeah.
So I just wrapped up a book on this same set of topics. It's basically exploring the past and future of fish and wildlife in America. So I've studied a whole lot of this similar stuff and have been like deep in the weeds. And I've had this like pendulum swinging experience. And I'm curious if you have had the same thing as you've dove into this world. So the more I learn about our history with wildlife and fish here in the United States, and really where things are going now, I sometimes kind of fly to one side, and if you can imagine the pendulum swinging far to one side, in which I'm really discouraged. You hear about just the way we've trashed these resources or wildlife populations in the past, or you see how many different things are struggling right now, how many species are in decline, how many wild places we're losing, how many, there's an endless list of depressing statistics if you want to find the stuff when it comes to just the decline in wildlife abundance and so many other things. So if you go down that path, it can become very discouraging. And I found myself swinging that way in the pendulum sometimes. On the flip side, though, as you study this history and as you study what people are doing today, you also, though, come across so many stories of inspiring individuals or projects or efforts in which we have saved species or saved places or people have done heroic things to protect our wildlife resources, or incredible new studies being done, or projects that are going to help this critter or that critter or this place or this water source. There's so many examples of people doing good work and good progress. And so I also find myself very inspired. If you look back, to some of the things you're talking about, you late 18th or 1800s, early 1900s, we basically wiped everything out almost. But at the last minute, we got our act together, and a handful of motivated people that really cared about this stuff stepped up and changed the way we think about these things, and we saved them. So in some ways, that's very inspiring that our predecessors, figured this out and got us back to the point that we are now, which is pretty darn good compared to 100 some years ago. So when you consider that, it can be very encouraging. Those are the two worlds I find myself like flipping between all the time these days. Does any of that resonate with you? Where have you found yourself?
So, man, I actually had this conversation probably with more people than wanted to hear me talk about it, just like buddies at home. But when I was in like the midst of researching some of this stuff, I even said, I think I was talking to my buddy Jordan, but I said, man, I have spent, I don't know how much time, driving down the road or whatever, just burning windshield time. And I'm sitting there thinking like, should I be mad about this? Like, because you look at it, I mean, like, because it's one of those things. Hindsight's 20/20, right? And if you look at it, like sure, and through this perspective, you're like, yeah, we should be thankful for what was saved. But man, those guys screwed up a whole lot.
Yeah.
And then it dawned on me one day. I was like, what in the world is me deciding to be mad about that? What positive result is that going to yield? Like nothing,
Yeah.
none whatsoever. Now it's worth looking at that and making note of what went wrong, so we make sure to not do the same thing. But again, and especially like learning that so literally all of it virtually came from a lack of understanding. And so, yeah, that resonates with me a lot, man, because like for instance, one of the episodes I have coming up is the conservation history of black bears here in Mississippi. A lot of these early episodes are stuff that's just like really close to home with me. We have like black bears are a native animal here. They were almost wiped out, but they were never fully wiped out. They were never functionally extinct here in Mississippi. At one point, I think the lowest number was like 12.
Wow.
So bad low.
Yeah.
The past few years, they've made a natural expansion. They've been protected. You can't shoot them, obviously, but they're not a hunting season or anything, and they've just been slowly, naturally expanding. And they're a very controversial animal now because if you go to the root of it, the reason they're controversial, people don't understand them. There's been enough generations occur where we don't have bears that people don't understand them and they don't know how to live with them. And so again, if I were to approach that, and the black bear program, the head biologist of that program is a very good friend of mine. I've actually, it's been awesome. I've been able to go and do a lot of bear projects with him and have my hands on live bears, which is incredible. But
That looks amazing.
Walking through him with that stuff and like just seeing just like from the eye level, from the ground level, like just the level of controversy and the questions and stuff. And it's like, if you went into that with that angry mentality, because there are some people that are like, we should exterminate these things while we have the chance. And if you go into that mad, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you go into that with like no, man, you don't understand. Let me explain this animal to you. Let me because again, I've researched this. If you can go back from records of Mississippi in the 1800s and 1900s, and bear was a more highly regarded meat animal than a whitetail was.
Right? Isn't that funny?
And so that's the way to approach it. Or the way that I've decided to approach it is like you have to approach it that way, or you're just going to yield more bad results. Like explain. Try to understand the animal and the habitat, and focus more on the people in our world that you talked about that have done heroic things to save wildlife.
What's your sense? I had kind of a similar conversation to this, or at least around like a broadly similar topic, with a guy named Dan Flores. Dan. He's also got a podcast for us. He's written a tremendous book on a similar topic. And so I was speaking with him about this same topic, and he has this unbelievable deep knowledge of the long, deep history of, our continent and what's gone on with wildlife. But I think when you talk to someone like that, they have, he has seen this through the context of a different generation than you and I, right? And I guess I'm just curious, as someone who, similar age to me, hangs out with a similar circle, what's your read on like us, like where on like our generation and our understanding of this stuff and where we are at with this? Because I think someone who's I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say here, like, but maybe you're getting the general thing I'm flinging at you. Like, you talked about how like understanding this stuff matters, and how like shifting our perspective on these issues. And also maybe shifting from being just like a consumer to being more of like a advocate, or at least, being able to, work with these things. I guess that's something I'm feeling a little bit more with like our generation, is like, it's not as common now for people to just be like, I just want to shoot stuff. I think it's becoming a little more common. Like, yes, I like to hunt, or yes, I like to fish. And with that comes, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Is that something that you are seeing too, or is there anything else that you're kind of sensing when it comes to, this next generation of hunters and anglers and hopefully conservationists? I'm horrible at asking questions today, Lake. Sorry, that was a real roundabout way of getting to something to you.
Yeah, I think I smell what you're stepping in. Man, So I think looking at, like kind of the our demographic, right? That particular age range or whatever. And you could go younger too.
Yeah.
Um, if I were to go with the negative first, I'll go negative, then I'll go positive. The negative I would say is we live in such a dense information era that sometimes that can yield two not so good results. One, I think it can be taken for granted.
Mm.
Two, and what I mean by it can be taken for granted is I think no one wants to go to find some of these records I've been telling you about, or stuff that was going on in Mississippi in the 1800s. I had to do more than type it into Google and see what popped up on the AI results.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's becoming like information is so easy that it's like, why would I take another step? I got my quick answer right there. That's problem number one. Problem number two is like, it's real easy to get the wrong information. Like there's a lot of like, you could go and you can get caught in your own echo chamber if you want to. Like you can Google until you find the answer you want to find. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But on the positive side of that, I remember talking to Will Primos and Brad Ferris about it, about like content in like this newer, in like this current time. And they were like, man, back in the time where they were making VHSs, Primo's Truth About Hunting VHSs, they're like, if we even tried to put in a segment about the NWTF and turkey research, like no one wanted to watch it. They were like, it would be clear that like people didn't really care about watching this kind of stuff. Whereas now, like I'm sure you've heard it too. When if I interview a biologist about something, some of them will go on and on. They're like, people just, it's so encouraging. People care to know about this now.
Yeah.
And that like I said, I went negative first. I think the positives heavily outweigh the negatives because it is, dude, this podcast that I'm doing, where we're looking at this stuff. If what you're asking about, if that wasn't true, I don't think this podcast would ever even been entertained to be an idea, because it would be like, why would they care?
Yeah. Good point.
You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
So I think people have a more, well, let's go, not to derail the conversation, but like the current public lands issue. Thank God I haven't heard anybody say, man, we just can't get hunters to call about this stuff. You know what I mean? Everyone's been like, this is great. Everyone's come together and they're calling and emailing. So yeah, I think there is more of a sense of wanting to understand and caring about the resource. And that can only yield good things.
So, as far as you've gone so far into this world, you mentioned earlier that you said that, one of the things that stood out as maybe like a consistent thing was the fact that, you can't fight for or advocate what you don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
But what about like a lesson or a takeaway or like an action item? Like, I mean, you've looked at, what happened to buffalo. You looked at what's been going on with black bears. You've looked at, quail. You've looked at deer and what's gone on in Mississippi a little bit. Is there anything as far as like moving forward that we as hunters and anglers can be thinking about or trying to do a better job of, or digging into more if we want to make sure that things are trending up rather than down? You've got to study a handful of these stories now. And I'm just curious if there's any like action or priorities that we as individuals can be keeping in mind so far.
Yeah. So like there's actually like the quail was a topic that I did. Like I said, this other episode came out, but I did 2 episodes on it. Like the next one, and it's kind of it's centric on quail, but it's focused on kind of what you're talking about. It's like, all right, I understand that we used to have a lot of quail, and I can wrap my head around why they were diminished so much. But episode 2 is like, what's the future of them? Like, what can we do? And one of the biggest things is like just taking some ownership, like understanding that is a resource that has to be managed. And that sounds cliche, but like in that other episode where it's focused on the future of quail, like I interview some people that they're like one of the guys, man, he's such a fun guy to talk to. He's in his 80s now, and he had quail. Like it's this land has been in his family since he was a kid, and he watched the quail get diminished, and it just broke his heart because he cared about quail hunting like you care about whitetail hunting, and that dude made it his personal mission to establish quail back on his place. He never had any restocked or anything like that. It was just he got with some biologists, he got with some people that knew what they were doing, and they were like, "We've got to fix this place." And they did all the habitat work and continue to do the habitat work. And it's a bit of a it's an anomaly of a story in some ways because now he's done so well with it and spread the progress out between his neighbors and got them on with the same program because who would have thought when he starts doing all this awesome habitat work for quail, he started guess what else went up? His turkey quality, his deer quality. Dude, you should see like some of that place, like with the wildflowers on it, and just like it looks like something out of a time machine. But yeah, just taking ownership, man. Like not being passive about it and not going, well, that's what we got a Department of Wildlife for. That's what the biologists do. Like again, the wildlife thrive when, and I don't mean this arrogantly. It's just like history shows it in the world that we live in today. Wildlife thrive when humans want them to thrive, and that I mean it's pretty much as simple as that. And there's so much proof there, but like, so yeah, like as far as going forward, it's taking ownership, and you're like, don't sit there and go, man, I wish the turkey population in whatever state you live in was doing better. Okay, what can you do about it? Like, what can you do as an individual? You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, it's such a great point, and we have a huge opportunity in that way. And I've talked about this on so many episodes in the last couple of years. But hunters manage nearly 400 million acres of land across the nation. That's almost as big as our entire federal public land estate. So when you look at the swath of land that we have influence over, it's real. I mean, so yeah, we don't need to wait for anybody. We can tackle a lot of the stuff ourselves. I mean, that's such a huge thing. So I love that that's something that you are going to be exploring in that quail episode. And it's so funny, like so many of us, at least, in my circles, we come to this first through whitetails, right? Because so many of us love white-tailed deer. That's America's critter. They're everywhere. And you might get a lease or own some land or have access to something. And through that, though, you then have this opportunity to then help all these other critters that aren't doing as well. And like you mentioned, you do some good stuff for quail or for grouse or for pollinators or whatever it is. Almost always, it's going to be great for your deer too. So you're going to get win-wins across the board. It just takes a little bit extra time just to kind of think through what you're doing. But super rewarding to see that kind of thing.
Yeah, man. And we're actually like, there's one, it's not done yet. I haven't even made the first interview, but there's a couple episodes that I'm working on lining up the interviews for, but they're going to highlight people that have done just that. Like like I probably shouldn't say too much about it yet, but like one of them is a landowner that the land has been in their family for literally hundreds of years, and their farm, their property is. Again, I keep saying the word like a time machine or a time capsule because it is, but do they have done so much work on it, and it is work these days to maintain it at the level they have to where it's just, man, just the attention they have paid to native habitat and consistent prescribed fire, and just I could go on and on and on, but the ripple effect that places like that have, not from just like people coming out there and seeing their place, and so their wheels start spinning. What can I do on my place? The ripple effect on how they're affecting their neighboring properties in a positive way. And to your point, like the further you go east, the further public land there is, right? Mississippi's like 94% private or something like that. And so much of our Department of Wildlife management strategy is aimed towards like, well, I'll give you an example. I think it was last spring, they had a game bird weekend. And what they did, it was open to the public. It didn't matter if you owned 10 acres or 10,000 acres. I think it was like $30. And you got fed breakfast and lunch for 2 days. You had seminars where you could do Q&A with different biologists, habitat managers. There was prescribed burning, there was native plants, there was trees, there was everything you could imagine. And then we went out and did a prescribed fire. We did some like hands-on type stuff, and
That's
it was
cool.
completely geared towards like the dude who owns 35 acres and is wanting to know, well, what in the world can I do? And that's the way, like that's the way forward.
Yeah, that's so cool. So with whitetails, perfect segue here with whitetails in the mind. What other than chasing around all these new podcast stories and burning the tires off your truck, traveling to these places, what's your whitetail world look like this summer? Do you have time to do much prep yet, or is all this keeping you out of the whitetail woods?
A little bit. It's definitely out of it a little bit. The other part of it is like it's so miserably hot right now. If you wanted to do anything, I will say, and I'm not unique in this way. I find myself doing some whitetail scouting while I'm out turkey hunting, and literally the last day of turkey season. The last day of turkey season down here is May 1st. And I always hunt May the 1st because one's the last day of turkey season. Two, it's the day my grandmother passed away a few years ago. And so I go out on that day. It doesn't matter what the weather is, doesn't matter. I just go. And I went to a place on public around here that I had not been to in a long time. And I was walking in there. It was late in the morning. I was just kind of cruising. And anyway, there was a place, and this is all in public. Some of the timber had been logged and had been logged for a little while. So there was this giant thicket. And so you have this big thicket right here. And I'm walking the edge of this thicket. I'm like, man, I'm already thinking, I'm like, man, I wonder the deer going to be bedding up in here now. And walk a little bit further. And there's like, and like I said, I hadn't been to this spot in a while, but I'd hunted this area of this forest for quite a while. And I was far enough back in there that like I already knew. I was like, man, not a whole lot of folks would come back in here. And I come up and there's like 4 big white oak trees, like 30 yards off of this thicket. And I was like, yep, marking that.
Yeah.
Before I left that spot, like I was like, I'm gonna have a camera in here the closer we get to season. And I already found a tree that I could get in, and man, early October, if I can get a north or an east wind, that's where I'm going to be. That's where you can find me.
So
Yeah.
is summer scouting not as much of a thing down by you because of the miserable, humid, hot weather? Or do folks like still get out like velvet scouting? Is that a thing down by you? Like by me, come July, a lot of evenings you're out sitting on the edge of a bean field glassing, late July into August. Is that just a crazy thing to do by you because of the weather?
Not because of the weather. If you live in the Mississippi Delta, you're probably doing some of that. Just because there's not as much, like just not near as much row crop. Like our row crop down here in the other parts of the state is loblolly pine trees. Honestly, like there's just not a whole lot of like places where you could go and just like glass deer.
Yeah.
And so the closer it gets, like I know some folks in the Delta that they'll spend some time doing some velvet scouting because that out there you actually it'd be worth your time to do it. But like around here, Central, like I don't do much velvet stuff. We run cameras for sure, but not a whole lot of velvet stuff unless you go down there.
Okay. So what's the summer camera program in your neck of the woods?
Dude, look, what the most now I don't do it. I don't baiting's legal down here. that's about 95% of what the camera running consists of, and
Yeah.
that's just a fact. Like I said, it's legal. I I have done it before. I make no bones about it now. I'm not a big fan of it, for a whole swath of reasons. But that's the way most of it is done these days. And if not that, it's usually like a mineral rock or something like that. Uh, if I was to go run some cameras, I probably would. Would I? Man, I normally don't even start touching them until you know late September.
So, if you were going to try to get some summer pictures without bait, is there
Mhm.
anyone who's doing it in a way where you can get some decent pictures despite not having that big attractant? Because that, like, I remember early, I mean, it's always a challenge to get pictures in the summer without the easy option of a trophy rock or bait or something.
Yeah,
It's a little bit
yeah,
easier if you've got row crops. It's got to be really tough
yeah,
without any of those options.
yeah, dude. Man, I'm just being honest with you. I don't even know if I've ever even tried. To be totally honest. And now, I
Yeah.
mean, that's interesting because now my wheels are spinning. I mean, if someone was like, "You must try to get some good pictures," I'm like, "What would I do?" But I could figure something out, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I've ever really done it. And it's always like like a trophy rock or something like that.
Yeah. Man, those are deadly effective in the summer.
Yeah,
That's for sure. I
yeah.
mean, I'm not a baiting guy myself, but I, I did like it back in the day when I could put a trophy rock out there over a camera in the summer. And the pictures rolled in. Can't argue with
Uh,
that.
Dude, well, like when I was growing up, like if you heard of somebody at home getting caught hunting over corn or something, it was like they were like a social pariah. It was like, and you'd be like, "Wow, you do that?" Well, now like it's completely legal. So, and like right when it was legalized, it was like, "Are you kidding me? Why wouldn't we do this?" And so I mean, I used it for a while, and then I just kind of was like, like I said, whole list of reasons. But personally, I don't care to do it anymore. I don't knock anyone that does. I just don't.
Have you found down by, in places like that where there's so much of it, are the guys who are like, or guys and girls who are killing like the big bucks, mature bucks, are they even doing that on bait, or are they having to kind of play off of it and shift it around? And or is other people's baiting impacting people's ability to do that too?
But well, yes. So I'll answer the second one first. Is other people's baiting impacting people? 100%, like 100%. And so, and like it's a very man. It's such a nuanced and complex issue. Um, I have friends, several friends, who don't really care to bait. They just don't. And they have places that they put a lot of time into, working on the habitat, like really trying to make the place better. And they, and this is this is anecdotal, but this happens a lot. Like I'm thinking of one particular friend who had a place he was working on, and he has a friend has a neighboring property that's like 40 acres. Nothing is done on that 40 acres in terms of habitat, but they put a corn feeder out there and let it spin. And now, like that dude's, pulling deer off, like directly benefiting from his habitat and deer. I mean, because they're gonna go to that corn feeder, man. They just are.
Yeah.
And so he was like in this position, just like conflicted. He was like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to bait, but like the deer are just getting suctioned off of my property, you know?
Yeah.
So I refer to baiting a lot of times as this self perpetuating thing because that's the mentality. Like, well, if I don't, my neighbor's going to, and then I'm not going to have any deer. And to some degree, that's true, unfortunately. The upside of it, like I said, that if there is a positive of it, there are a lot of people that enjoy doing it, to each their own. Uh, but there are people are killing some really big deer doing it. Like I can't argue with that fact at all. Like people are killing some really big deer that way.
So one thing with with the baiting programs and or, cameras, there's always this question of, are you educating deer? Like these are tools that supposedly can help you. But also, if you're in there messing around with things or you've got cell cameras doing their thing, there's always then these questions about, are you also doing more harm than good with this human influence, whether that's, messing around with cameras or messing around with your feeder or whatever it is. I got to believe you've seen a bunch of different instances with this, whether it be on your own stuff or, rolling around with the Primos crew. I mean, you've seen a lot. Where's your head at on kind of that balance? Because I'm always trying to balance, especially like for me, with cameras is the big one. But what have you seen over the years?
Well, it's a similar thing. Like to your point, like with cameras, right? It's like before the cellular trail camera. If you wanted to run a trail camera, you had to walk out there. You had to track all the way up through there, leave your scent all over the place. You could go through all the precautions you wanted to. You're still leaving some sort of scent. You just are, and then cellular trail cameras happened, and that was very. I mean, that was a significant change because that's just like a huge portion of human influence and pressure on the woods just eliminated. So it was the same thing, like when people figured out feeders that you could put on a timer and set to spin a certain amount of days. Because like in Mississippi, like I said, it's legal, but you can't just go and dump it on the ground. It has to be like the laws, like it has to be in a covered trough or like a spin cast type feeder. And I mean, I've seen it several times. I got buddies that deal with it, and it's not like you can't like bet on it, but there are certain mature deer that they figure that out, man. Like, and I will say, like, some people will tell you, they'll like, man, you want to make a buck go nocturnal, start feeding them. Like they fit. Now, like I said, that is not 100% whatsoever, but some of those 5, 6 year old bucks, like, yeah, like they'll come to your bait at 9 o'clock at night. And so that definitely does happen. And some of the folks that are killing them now, the most probably popular tactic is it's some sort of bait. Typically, like even if it isn't a trough feeder, they will put just a huge amount of feed where they don't have to go back in there for a while, and then they pop a cellular trail camera up, and so it's basically the same premise. Like the food's there, but there's not a human going in and out of there, and they got that cellular trail camera popping. And some of them, I know some guys that are like, the second he daylights one time, he's in there. He's in there hunting them, or some of them like, I got to see him daylight twice before I risk putting some pressure in there. But that's typically how it goes. There's still a very important element of like limiting human interaction or human pressure on the woods.
So, like, how the heck are you killing deer if you don't have 200 pounds of corn out there and a cell cam telling you when they show up for the first time?
Well, let me give an honest representation of myself. Like, I don't try to present myself as some awesome deer killer. One thing that because honestly, man, and this is like, let me be clear. I have something against baiting. I don't care for it. Trail cameras, I have nothing against trail cameras, but I rarely use them anymore. And I'll be completely honest with you why. In recent years, because when I was doing stuff with Primos, we did so much with product development. It was just like nonstop trail camera stuff, to where like I remember, like, I never wanted to be. One time we were going to hunt somewhere, and I was like, had this complete notion of we are wasting our time. And the reason I felt that way is because the way the trail cameras are running. Yeah. And it hit me. I was like, man, that's no way to be, And so the past couple of years, I either like on public, like where I was telling you about, where I found those white oak trees, I'm going to put a trail camera there, just because I'm curious what's coming in there. But the past few years, like between public and a place that me and my buddy have access to, we have access to about 1,200 acre track, which is nice. One, because it's 1,200 acres, of course, right? But two, with a property that big, you actually can have some deer that property's big enough. You can have some deer and have them not be influenced by, a feed that's going on in the perimeters of it. And so that's what we've been doing is like just going in there and just go honestly, man, just going in there and hunting, you know, just to go at like old school in it, man. Like going there, finding sign and just trying it out, seeing what happens and just putting it together. And like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I've really enjoyed it. Um but yeah.
What's like I mean, kind of going back to one of the things I just said there ago, you've been able to have this wide exposure, I think, to a lot of different ways of doing stuff, right? I gotta believe with the crew you've rolled with and getting to hang out with folks like Will or Brad and so many others, you've learned from some of the best, no doubt, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What have been those major things you've taken from those folks you've learned from? Like the major, you know, like if there was like a stone tablet and
Mhm.
Will wrote down like the 5 most important things to be a
Yeah.
successful deer hunter or something like that, or Brad or whoever it was. Do a handful of things stand out that you've been able to take from these legends over the years that you're still putting into play now yourself when you're doing it on your own?
Honestly, it would be if, especially if I'm just talking about like deer hunting. Uh, One thing I learned it, and I learned it in like fairly early, like in the first 3 years of being there. Like, because I remember the first year I kept on waiting for me to like catch them doing this like huge thing, and me go, oh, that's the thing that makes them so good at this, you know. And there honestly there wasn't some like huge thing that they were doing differently. And like if this sounds cliche, I forgive me, but it's like it's true, and I can give some examples. They weren't doing the like a lot of the big things that they were doing were big things that everybody else were doing. Like of course you hunt the wind, of
Yep.
course you take the proper amount of time to make sure your gear's good to go, and you practice with your bow. Of course, you when the you watch for cold fronts, like the obvious stuff. The things that they did were like this culmination of small things that other people might not do. Like um you probably have buddies like this too. I've been guilty of it before. When they're approaching a morning or an afternoon hunt, the mindset is like, what is the latest I can possibly sleep and get
Yeah.
there, and
Yeah.
be getting up the tree as quick as you can.
Uh-huh.
And whereas like them, it's like, I want an hour of a grace period. Like I don't want there to be a single chance that I'm late. Right. Uh what it talking about, like, I mean, everyone knows, like some people would say like routes to a stand is a big thing. Dude, some of the ways when because I filmed Brad a lot, especially in the early years. Like I deer hunted with Brad more than anybody else. I would get aggravated at that dude sometimes for some of the crazy out of the like just out of the way like routes we would take to get to a tree stand. But like there is no way that Brad was going to risk that a deer was going to smell us getting in there. Like there was
Hmm.
never ever a lazy approach to a stand. Like it did not happen. Uh Dude, everything Brad and Will, they both did this. Man, if there was a T screw, like a nut like that you're gonna put in the tree to hang your backpack on, that T screw is gonna have electrical tape wrapped all the way around it. There was not anything that was gonna make a ding. Not
Yeah.
one. Like, I mean, just like all this small, minute stuff. Um that just culminated and just made it to where they made it to where it was as seamless as possible.
Yeah. Man, that's you, you can't hear that enough. I mean,
Mhm.
I've heard different versions of that from so many people that it's almost like the golden rule of deer hunting now. It's there's no silver bullet. There's no easy answer. There's no like, oh, this is the secret, except for do all the little things. It's like there's no big
Yeah.
thing because all of the little things added up, layer after layer after layer, are what lead to success in the end. That's just so
Well,
true.
dude, even I've got another one. Like I remember, we were hunting somewhere. This was really early. This might have been the first or second fall I was with him. And there was this big 8-point that we were after. And he was cool, man. He had like matching kickers on G2. I mean, just a cool buck. Had a lot of mass, dark horned. He was just cool. He was really cool. And we had gone through like all this rigmarole trying to get this deer in front of us. And finally, Brad got this notion. There was this tree. I remember it. I remember it's like it was yesterday. We'd been hunting. We'd had a double lock-on set in this honey locust tree. Is an early season, like super awesome food source in the early season. And we just weren't like, even though we thought the wind was right, we thought our approach was right. But after, I think we went in there like 2-3 times, and we had some does and stuff come in, but we never saw that buck. And Brad was like, something's not right. Like he's either catching us coming in there, something. And he decides, like walking out one day, he's like, we're moving sets. We're going to that tree. And there was this wonky tree. Like it took us forever to get the stand in there. And it worked like that. Like as much careful as we were, as we were trying to take to get in there, there must have been something with the route that we were taking, because the first time we moved that set, we ended up shooting that deer. But the point that I was making is, like we're sitting in this double set, and does started coming through early, filtering through, heading towards that honey locust tree. We're not 50 yards from where our first set was. Game of inches, right? And where the way we had the 2 lock-on set, like I always had binos on, even though I was running the camera. And me and Brad just chilling, these does coming through, and there was one like 3-year-old buck, and I'm just looking at the buck, and I pick up my binos, look at him, sit there and film a little bit more, and I go to grab my binos again, and I feel Brad's hand just stop me, and I'm like, what? And he said, what are you doing? I said, looking at that buck. He goes, you already looked at him. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, why would you risk movement that you ain't got to risk? Fair enough.
Yeah. Interesting.
Stuff like that, man. Like, Brad, like he's not going to be constantly doing this number with his binos. He's going to look as much as he needs to, and then he's conserving movement.
Little things, they matter. Man, that's so true. What about like unique to the South? I mean, you guys, I know, get to go up and do some stuff in the Midwest, but then you've also obviously have this Southern experience being down there yourselves. This is a place that I've always fallen short with wired hunt over the years. As being a Northern guy myself, it's so easy to ignore or just be ignorant of the unique aspects of hunting down South. Having gotten to experience a little bit of all of it yourself, what has stood out to you as like, man, these are the big things that are different about hunting in the South, or ways you need to approach it differently than, what you see everybody doing on TV in the Midwest, or, just how folks do it in Michigan or Iowa or Illinois?
Dude, I'd say one of like the biggest things is a lot of the other places that we would go for whitetail when we traveled, even if it was like not a crazy terrain laden place like Wisconsin can be, or Iowa or something like that. Like it's crazy. And I grew up hunting this flat country down here, so I didn't know much different than it. But I remember the first time that I went to Iowa, and I hear someone say a pinch point, and I look at this pinch point, I'm like, no kidding, and so one of the bigger obstacles or like huge things that you would have to overcome at home without bait, obviously, like bait can be the great equalizer, but it's learning like how to pattern deer movement in that flat country. And there's like, man, one of it's like vegetation, like hunting privet lines is a big thing down here. Another thing, and it's going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I'll elaborate, is learning to look at a topographic map. Because one thing that I learned is I can go to a place. I'm thinking of a place right now, a place that we hunted on the Big Black River, especially river bottoms. Like, of course, the river bottom's pretty flat, Man, you pull up like a topo map, like on X or something, and the slightest topographic change, and I mean so slight that like some of that river bottom stuff, you pull it up and you turn topo on, and you're like, there's still not any lines here. There is no There is no topo. But if you see that line, if you see a single line, like I will go and scout along that one topographic change because that wildlife knows it's there. Like, you'll find even when you're standing there, you're like, this all still looks the same. Like this doesn't look hardly anything different from here or there, but it'll be just slight enough that the vegetation will be different, that deer will be using it for travel, that you'll find the most subtle saddle, and there will be a trail through there. But that is huge down at home, is learning how to determine travel in that flat country. I think I would say that, to me, I'd say that's probably the biggest.
Yeah. And I don't know what it's like exactly where you hunt, but one thing that I've seen and heard, like when I went and did a project down in Mississippi last summer, or the summer before, was down there is it the DeSoto National Forest? Is that right?
Yeah, you were like down around like Leaf River or something, weren't you?
Yeah, that sounds right. I think that rings a bell.
Yeah.
Being in some of that country, you can just see like these vast tracts of timber. You know, I mean, there's not the obvious vegetation pinch points or like obvious bedding, obvious feeding, obvious travel from A to B like you have in row crop country. And I know that's, all these pine stands through Georgia or Mississippi or Arkansas or Alabama. Like I know that's a consistent thing. I've hunted down in the southern part of Alabama, same thing. Like that is a real deal. Trying to dissect big country like that is not easy.
No, it's not, and dude, it'll drive you crazy. Like even the guys that I know that are like, I got some buddies down here, man. Like I said, and I'm just being honest. Like as a deer hunter, I can hold my water, but I got buddies that like I'm like, dude, that's a good deer hunter, and even those guys, they'll drive themselves insane, especially on a new property, like trying to figure out. Because the other thing is, like, well, I said they will be using those subtle topo changes. It's not like I remember one of the first times I filmed in the Midwest. I think I saw every deer that inhabited those woods come down this one ridge. Whereas like these, like you don't know what they're gonna do. Like you find a trail, like that buck's gonna be using it, but you don't know if he's using it then. It's just you drive yourself insane trying to pull a pattern on them. Food sources are huge. Like I said, that's why when I found those white oak trees that I was talking about earlier, I was like, ooh, when you find something like that next to a big thicket, like that's about as good of an indicator as you can get. Lord willing, we have a good acorn crop this year.
Yeah.
But stuff like that's good to key on. But yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough.
Do you have the itch yet? Like every year, right around July-ish is when I really start getting the whitetail itch. Like I'm thinking about it throughout the year for all sorts of different reasons in different parts of the year. But I don't start getting like weird until usually July. And that's when I'm like, oh man, I got to start watching my whitetail YouTube videos or pull out this North American whitetail and start annoying my wife with stuff like that. Has that started for you yet? Or if not, when does that peak?
Typically I've actually been like, and this is not, I've shot my bow 3 times, like 3 different days going out and shooting my bow. Shot like 3 times over the past week and a half. And some folks would be like, what are you doing? You should be shooting it more. Probably. But I'm saying that as in like, normally I'm not shooting it all this time of year. No, I'm not. Like July, August is when I'm typically like out there every day shooting.
Yeah.
But I'm a little like, I'm kind of surprised myself that I'm shooting this early. But I'd say typically probably around the same time frame, especially about August, you really start thinking about it, and you've been like turkey season is far enough away, and by the time you hit August, you've gone about as long as you can stand without being able to find something,
For me, and I know this isn't possible down your neck of the woods as much, but like for me, that first time when you see a buck in a field, like a bean field or alfalfa field or something, you're like, oh, that's a nice buck. Like the first time they've grown enough where you're like, ooh, and you're seeing those like orange, beautiful, shiny coats out there in a green field, that just like gets my juices flowing. And it's usually just downhill from there. So we're getting really close. We're getting close.
See, dude, and this may sound goofy to you, but like I get when I think because like I mean I may luck up and shoot a good buck in October. Typically, if I'm going to kill a good buck, it's normally later in the year, December, January, rut stuff,
Yeah.
like heavily after the like post rut keto and food source type stuff. When I'm getting jazzed up about October early bow season, I'm thinking about shooting does. Which again, we have a lot of deer down here, but I love shooting does with my bow.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, and like I said, some folks are like the doe, but like even when I'm talking about that white oak spot, like of course I would love for a good buck to walk into there. But when I'm thinking about going in there and hunting it, I'm thinking about, ooh, there's gonna be some does come into here that I can pop. I love it.
Yeah. I feel like I'm getting more of that way every year, more and more. There's something about I don't know if this is the same for you, but like when I flip the switch from like I'm in buck mode to instead like doe patrol, when I flip that switch, it's a totally different hunt, and it's obviously a more target rich environment. And I don't know, it's just so much fun. It's maybe less pressure, but more opportunity coming your way likely. I love that. So
see, I'm on doe patrol a whole lot more than I'm on buck patrol.
Yeah, I'm following that path more these days myself too.
I love
it. Well, like, give me this before we wrap it up. Give me the quick rundown for folks on where to find the new podcast, when episodes are coming out, and if there's anything else that you can or want to preview for people other than what we've discussed so far.
Yeah. So Backwoods University, it comes out every other week, but I told one person bi-weekly, and they're like twice a week. I'm like, no.
That is common mistake.
Yeah. So every other week. So we had one come out Monday, June 23rd. And so the next one will come out in 2 weeks, but it comes out on Mondays, every other Monday on the Bear Grease feed. Clay was talking about it the other day. It's like our feed's getting so complicated, it's getting lengthy to start to explain it, because you got to go Backwoods University on the MeatEater podcast network on the Bear Grease feed.
Yeah, it is getting a little wordy. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, man, I'm really excited about it. I think you're off to a great start. I appreciate the issues and topics and stories that you're sharing with people. It's so fascinating. It's so important. So keep it up, man. And thanks for taking this time to chat deer and wildlife and all the good stuff in between.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. I always enjoy chatting with you.
It's great stuff. All right, and that's going to do it. Thank you for joining me. Hopefully is the word, I believe. Hopefully you enjoyed my chat with Lake. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.